There is a town in Pennsylvania where the ground beneath your feet has been burning since 1962, and government experts say it could keep burning for another 250 years. It's called Centralia, and the story of how a routine spring cleanup slowly erased an entire American town sounds made up. It isn't. To understand Centralia, you have to understand what it was built on. This fold of the Appalachians in eastern Pennsylvania holds some of the richest anthracite coal on Earth, hard, dense, slow-burning coal packed into thick veins that dive and twist beneath the ridges. In 1854, a mining engineer named Alexander Ray laid out streets on a hillside in Columbia County, and the coal did the rest. Within a generation there were collieries and breakers, hotels, theaters, 7 churches, more than 24 saloons, and nearly 3,000 people, Irish, Ukrainian, Polish, Welsh, men who went underground every morning to cut the coal out of the dark, and came home black to the eyelids. It was a hard place from the start. In 1868, Alexander Ray himself was ambushed and shot dead on a lonely road outside town, a murder blamed on the Molly Maguires, the secret society of Irish miners waging a shadow war against the coal bosses. 3 men eventually hanged for it. And here, early in the story, the record slides into legend, so let's flag it honestly. Local tradition claims that in 1869, a Catholic priest named Father Daniel Ignatius McDermott was roughed up by Molly Maguires near his church, St. Ignatius, and answered with a curse, that a day would come when Centralia would be wiped from the face of the earth, and only his church would still be standing. There is no contemporary documentation of any curse. It is folklore, pure and simple. But the people of Centralia would have more than a century to wonder about it. By the middle of the 20th century, the great mines were dying. The companies pulled out, the deep workings flooded, and men scratched a living from bootleg pits and strip mines. By 1962, Centralia was a quiet borough of roughly 1,400 people sitting on top of a honeycomb, miles of abandoned tunnels, gangways, and pillared chambers, all threaded through coal that had never been removed. All that black rock beneath their basements was waiting for exactly one thing, a spark. It got one in the spring of 1962. The borough landfill sat in an abandoned strip mine pit beside the Odd Fellows Cemetery on the southeast edge of town, and it had become an eyesore. With Memorial Day approaching, the council wanted it cleaned up. So, according to the account most historians accept, on May 27, 1962, volunteer firefighters set the dump on fire, let the garbage burn down, and hosed it out. It was common practice in those days. It had been done before, without incident. But this time, the smoke came back. The crews doused it again. It came back again. What nobody fully appreciated was that the pit had an unsealed opening in its floor, a gap leading down into the old mine workings. The fire slipped through it, found a seam of anthracite, and began to feed. And I should flag that even the origin is debated. Journalist David DeCock, who covered Centralia for decades, documented the deliberate trash burn. Author Joan Quigley argued that a hauler may have dumped hot ashes or embers, and an older local theory insists the fire was a leftover of a 1932 colliery blaze that never truly died. Whatever the spark, by August 1962 the result was the same. Carbon monoxide was drifting out of the earth, and the fire was underground, and moving. What followed was 2 decades of too little, too late. Bulldozers dug trenches to cut the fire off. Each time, the flames had already slipped past the line before the trench was finished. Crews drilled boreholes and flushed the old tunnels with wet fly ash to smother the burn. The fire simply went around. Projects started, ran out of money, and stopped. Nearly $7 million spent by the late 1970s, and the fire bigger every single year. There is one bitter detail here, flagged as an estimate. In the very first months, one proposal to dig the entire fire out was priced at roughly $175,000. It was never funded. By 1983, the engineering estimate for full excavation had swollen to $660 million, with no guarantee it would even work. And all the while, Centralia lived on top of it. At first the fire was almost a curiosity. Snow melted in strange bare patches. Gardeners found the soil warm in December. One resident famously picked ripe tomatoes in the middle of winter. Then it stopped being funny. Vegetation died in gray swaths above the burn front. Steam curled from cracks on the hillside and drifted between cemetery headstones. Basements grew warm to the touch, and with the warmth came the real killer, gas. Carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide seeped up through foundations, invisible, odorless, patient. People complained of headaches, dizziness, a strange sleepiness that wouldn't lift. The state installed gas monitors in living rooms and bedrooms, boxes that shrieked in the night. Some residents slept with their windows open in the dead of a Pennsylvania winter, just in case they never woke up otherwise. In 1979, the town got a number it couldn't ignore. John Coddington, the mayor, who also ran a gas station in the middle of town, dipped a stick into one of his underground fuel tanks and noticed it came up hot. When the gasoline was measured, it stood at 172 degrees Fahrenheit, nearly 78 Celsius, inside a buried steel tank surrounded by earth. The fire was no longer at the edge of town. It was under the town. Then came February 14, 1981. Valentine's Day. A 12-year-old boy named Todd was in his grandmother's backyard when he noticed a wisp of smoke rising from the grass. He walked toward it, and the ground simply let go. A sinkhole about 4 feet wide opened under his feet and swallowed him, a muddy, steaming throat dropping into the old mine workings, with reports at the time claiming the void plunged more than 100 feet, though the exact depth is still argued. Todd caught hold of an exposed tree root and clung to it, screaming, wrapped in a column of hot, wet steam. His 14-year-old cousin, Eric Wolfgang, heard him, ran over, grabbed his hand, and hauled him out of the earth. When officials tested the plume rising from that hole, the carbon monoxide concentration was high enough to kill. A boy's life had come down to a tree root and a cousin who happened to be close. The sinkhole did what 19 years of smoke had not, it put Centralia on the national news. Reporters descended on the borough. And what they found was not a town united by disaster, it was a town at war with itself. On what locals called the hot side, near the burn, people wanted out. On the cold side, many insisted the danger was wildly exaggerated, their basements were cool, their gardens grew, their monitors stayed silent. Some went further, suspecting, and this is disputed to this day, that the real goal was to empty the town and claim the anthracite beneath it, a coal reserve worth an enormous fortune. No official evidence ever supported the land grab theory. But in a town built by coal companies and then abandoned by them, distrust ran bone deep. In 1983, the federal government put the question to the residents themselves, and Centralia voted on its own existence, 345 to 200 in favor of taking buyouts and leaving. Congress appropriated $42 million. Through the mid-1980s the relocation ground forward, house by house. People signed papers, packed up rooms their grandparents had wallpapered, and stood on the sidewalk while excavators folded their homes into their own cellar holes. More than 500 houses and businesses were bought and demolished. Whole rows vanished, sometimes leaving a single row house standing alone, its exposed brick flanks propped up with timber braces. The population, over a thousand at the start of the decade, fell to 63 by 1990. The holdouts hung on. In 1992, Governor Bob Casey invoked eminent domain and condemned every remaining building in Centralia. Legally, the residents were now squatters in homes their own hands had paid for. They fought it in court, and lost, and stayed anyway. In 2002, the Postal Service revoked the town's zip code, 17927, on paper, Centralia was being erased line by line. Finally, in 2013, after years of litigation, the last handful of residents, 7 people, reached a settlement, compensation, and the legal right to live out their lives in their homes, after which the properties passed to the state. Today fewer than 5 remain. They mow neat lawns on blocks with no neighbors, in a town that officially does not exist. The fire, meanwhile, kept signing its name on the landscape. In the early 1990s, a stretch of Route 61 just south of town buckled and split, steam rising from the cracks, the asphalt warmed to the touch, and the state closed it for good and rerouted the highway. Then the dead road became something no one predicted, a pilgrimage site. Nearly a mile of abandoned highway slowly disappeared under layer after layer of spray paint, names, jokes, memorials, murals, the famous Graffiti Highway, one of the strangest roadside attractions in America. It lasted until April 2020, when pandemic lockdown crowds swarmed the site, and the private owner brought in a fleet of trucks and buried the entire road under mounds of dirt. Even Centralia's ruins got condemned. Walk the town today and the eeriness is precise. The street grid is still there, curbs, intersections, stop signs, framing quiet blocks of brush where hundreds of buildings once stood. For cemeteries hold far more of Centralia's people than the town does. On the hill above it all, the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary Ukrainian Catholic Church still stands and still holds services, and yes, people notice how close that lands to the old curse, though the priest's own church, St. Ignatius, was actually torn down in 1997. On cold mornings you can still find the fire, bare, steaming ground where snow refuses to lie, vapor threading between headstones, vent pipes breathing heat. The burn has spread across hundreds of acres along multiple coal veins, with underground temperatures reported near 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit in places, and there is enough coal in the region seems, by government estimates, to feed it for another 2.5 centuries. There is even a buried postscript. In 1966, the town sealed a time capsule beside the Veterans Memorial, to be opened in 50 years. It came out of the ground in 2014, 2 years early, after vandals disturbed the site, and much of what was inside had drowned in groundwater. Even Centralia's message to the future barely made it out. One last flag for honesty, you will often hear that Centralia inspired Silent Hill. That's partly true. The screenwriter of the 2006 film said Centralia inspired his vision of the ash-choked town, but the original game came first, and drew from other sources. Centralia was not destroyed by a bomb, a flood, or a plague. It was destroyed by a trash fire, and by every reasonable-sounding decision that followed, each delay cheap, each fix modest, until the only affordable option left was surrender. Somewhere beneath Pennsylvania, the fire a work crew lit before Memorial Day in 1962 is burning at this exact moment, and it will still be burning long after everyone who remembers Centralia is gone. If you want more forgotten history that sounds made up but isn't, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.